Doug Martin today, also known as BFD, Big Freaking Dude. Uh, USNA of 2000. That's weird to say 2000. It's always like 01, 02, 99, but 2000 is definitely a unique year, right? The whole,
Last of the century, baby.
yeah, when everyone was freaking out about if the computers were going to crash or not.
Y2K.
There you go. Navy football, 96 to 99 long snapper. Also played some rugby, raised in Kansas City, and went to an all-male Jesuit school, high school of Rockhurst. Involved in football and rugby there. Became an NFO, naval flight officer. Did some TAD time, so did some GA time with the Navy football program post-graduation. Now the president of two different companies, TransPar Group and Mercury Associates, residing in Charleston area today. Transitioned from the NFO program into those things. Hobbies are golf, working out, snowboarding, traveling, and hanging out with the family, cooking. That's the intro. Getting into some memories. So my favorite part is first one, Bing Gabbard. I think he was a senior when I was a freshman, maybe.
He was 08,
Eight.
I think.
All right. So
Yep.
08 grad.
I think
so
he was a
senior when I was a sophomore.
Yeah, senior when you were a sophomore. Yeah.
Yeah. He said, Doug Martin taught my aviator practicum class. He may not remember this, but I tell a story a time or two and describe the type of student that I was. I'm guessing, like to his folks, that we had to turn in a 5 or 6 pager for a paper. And he typed 3 pages. And then he copied and pasted those 3 pages, 1 to 2. It turned out to be a 6 pager and turned it in like it was, slapped in the face emoji for him. He said you called him into the room and let him know that whole Navy football thing is supposed to work. You got to pull your weight and do the work. He still helped me through it. He was able to make it through that class.
So this is the story that I actually mentioned to you, and it was so funny. So that class, I mean, it's the easiest class you take. There's no class easier in the world. And the assignment was write 5 to 7 pages about anything related to naval aviation that you want to talk about. That's it. That's the whole assignment. And then I said, just follow these instructions. And so I get it. And they asked if they could include pictures. I said, yes, you can include pictures, but pictures can't take up more than a half a page. As many pictures as you want, but no more than half a page. So he turns his in. It's got 2 pictures. Each picture is the exact same picture. Each picture is half a page in and of itself. And it's barely 5.5 pages long with these 2 entire pages fully copied and pasted. And so I write like 70% on it and circle it. I put it down in front of him, Loose Hall, those big, huge chart tables. And he's sitting there next to his partner. And he looks at me like, what the? And I just said, come see me afterwards. He starts flipping through. And then that's when he literally did the hand to the face emoji in class and was like, I'm the biggest idiot on the planet. So,
he
ended up getting like an 85 or something because I gave him 100% after that, and I could only give him half of what he missed back or something. So,
gotcha. Yeah, if he had Chat GPT nowadays, he could probably
he'd been done in 36 seconds.
Exactly, right. That's crazy. That's a crazy technology for sure.
Yes, it is.
All right, next one, Tim Shubsda.
Shuby.
Tim long snapper, Tim kicker. He said you were the model of consistency when it came to game time, getting on the field. He said, if I missed a kick, it wasn't because of Doug. It was easy for Tim, and he also like spit out some stats on like all the kicks that he had and some of the ones that he missed, but it was never a variable. It was easy for Tim to take out that snapping variable issue that could happen because of that. Tight relationship y'all had, you, Tim, and Trey. I'm guessing Trey was a holder.
He was our punter. Trey caught every snap I ever snapped in a varsity game.
Gotcha. That you both stayed close through flight school after the fact. Spent plenty of study hours together prepping for the quals. Good story. So, last one, Terrence Anderson. He was a linebacker by trade when he came into the program, but he ended up being the center and also ended up being the team captain. So that's pretty cool. I'm guessing that's when Navy went from, pro style to ground game, maybe, or like
so all 4 years for us were the triple, and
okay.
But Terrence, his dad coached in Oklahoma, and Terrence knew Doc Fair when he got to the academy.
I got Doc Fair coming up too.
Terrence had both Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas as babysitters at different points when he was growing up. And Terrence was a 5'10", 295-pound center that did not allow a sack his senior year. He and Dave Rhino, our nose guard, were both so strong, and both of their backs were so jacked up that they weren't allowed to squat. Coach Folk wouldn't allow them to squat our senior year, and they would do leg press, and we would load the leg presses up, and then they would take turns sitting on top of the leg press after it was loaded with plates, and then they would press that. Terrence majored in economics, minored in Japanese, and then took the MCATs and got one of the 15 slots to be a doctor. Now he's an orthopedic surgeon, pediatric and hip specialty orthopedic surgeon. And he was also a battalion commander, second set.
Gotcha.
Terrence set a level of excellence that every person in that brigade aspired to. He was just
nice.
He was incredible.
Really cool. Well, this is what he had to say about you.
I brought him down a notch.
He didn't say that, but he said Doug is a fantastic human. Doug's always there in the best way possible. Those in the Brotherhood likely are fortunate to have several people in our lives that are always ready and willing to walk through the good and the bad without hesitation. Doug was one of those guys. For seemingly like everybody, he doesn't waver. Also, Doug consistently sees people in situations for better than they are. This optimism and expectation makes me a better person when I'm confronted with it. So
that's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Very humbling.
Awesome. All right. Story time. Turn it over to you.
So 2 quick corrections from your intro, just real quick. I didn't get to GA. So Dave Rhino was the defensive GA, and I think Pat Singleton was the offensive GA. They both became P3 pilots on down the line, but they were the 2 GAs. So I was just TAD waiting on flight school for 4 or 5 months. But unfortunately, I wish Big freaking Dude was what it was attributed to, but instead it was actually Big Fat Doug. And so I had my 2 roommates in VP 30 when I was going through VP 30, which is the rag for the P3 back in the day in Jacksonville. And I lived with two other dudes. One was a swimmer at the academy. The other one, I don't even know where BG went or B Lee went. I think he went to Bowling Green or something. He went somewhere up in Kentucky. He was from Franklin.
Okay. That's
Uh,
where I'm living. So,
yeah, up in there. And so his name was Brian Lee. Our other roommate was Brian Glazer, and they went by B Lee and BG. And so this is back in 2001 when we still had phone lines, hard line phone lines, and answering machines, which I know a lot of our listeners don't even know what those two things mean. But I come home one day and he's like, "Hey, you need to listen to the messages." So I go over and press the button, and you have no messages. He's like, "No, you got to listen to our message, to the message." I said, "Okay." So I press it, and it's like, "Hey, you've reached B Lee, BG, and BFD. Leave a message." And I just look at him. I go, "Who the hell's BFD?" He's like, "You are, Big Fat Doug." And that was it.
gotcha.
That was the end of call sign search for me. But yeah, man, I grew up oldest of three kids, two younger sisters. We're all very close in age, less than 2 years apart. Um, and my dad was also an NFO. He was a Top Gun instructor and a Rio and all that stuff. F4 Phantom, 1974 grad of the academy. He won more championships than I did, but his were in brigade intramural football, not in big boy football. He was not blessed with the size that I was able to eventually attain. He was skinny as a rail, but I knew at a very young age what I wanted to do, to just model myself after him. He never talked about anything really unless he was talking to some friends that were asking him questions, and then I'd eavesdrop, or I'd have to pick it out of him. I think he was very conscious about pressing me towards something that he didn't feel like anyone should be pressed towards, which was appreciative of me. But I got very lucky. We grew up in a phenomenal city and in a phenomenal area of Kansas City, Overland Park in Leawood, Kansas, which is very affluent. And going through middle school, I had classmates that would talk about suing the teacher if they yelled at them again and that sort of thing. And I couldn't stand it. So I was lucky enough. I went and did a visit one day at this private Jesuit Catholic high school. Our family wasn't Catholic or anything, but I went and did a visit one day, and it was the single greatest day of school I'd ever experienced. I was like, you had Taco Bell for lunch. It's just dudes running around. It's like being in the Navy football locker room. That's what the whole day of school was like on this day. And I said, I don't know what it takes to go there, Dad, but that's my home. That's where I want to go. And up till then, I played like 1 year of competitive football back in like fourth grade. Otherwise, football wasn't really my thing. And so he got a hold of a high school classmate of his that was actually teaching and coaching football there, and talked to him about it, gave me the green light. I got to go. And so he sent me to every sports camp the school hosted that summer before my freshman year of high school. And when I went to football camp, I listened to this head coach. His name's Tony Severino. He was actually the 2005 USA Today High School Football Coach of the Year for the nation. And if that would have been badminton camp, I'd have played badminton for 4 years. But it was football, and so I told my mom, "Hey, I got to go by."
It's funny how a good coach will.
He changed the entire trajectory of my life. I fell in love with football. He told everyone that was at this camp, the fastest way to get on the field is to learn how to long snap. There was one kid in that camp that knew how to long snap. His name was Johan Brownlee. I'll never forget his name. He didn't even graduate with us, but I owe that kid everything. he taught me how to long snap during that camp while I was playing quarterback for our camp team. And long snapping for me was easy. It was just, I threw the ball upside down and backwards instead of standing up. That was it. And that really changed the whole trajectory. My sophomore year in high school, they made an announcement that if, you were ready to meet with the college counselor, go down and see him. I went down and saw him the next day. And I said, I want to go to the Naval Academy. He pulled up my grades, started talking to me about how I needed to change my expectations. And I never talked to that guy again. So after that, my mom became my college counselor. And she made sure that I didn't get in trouble for not ever doing anything that guy wanted me to do. I only applied to one school. And funny, I applied to one school and one program. I applied to Navy ROTC. And my deal with my parents was if I don't get into the Naval Academy before New Year's, then I'll write out the essays for the rest of the colleges I was going to apply to. And I got a letter from Navy ROTC that says, sorry, but you've been denied at this time. And that happened in like October, November. I was like, if I can't get into ROTC, how the hell am I going to get into the academy? And then Christmas break, I got a letter of acceptance to the Naval Academy.
Nice.
And so that changed it all. And I got to sign a letter of intent and all that stuff in February. Coach Sev had 3 kids, 3 boys. I played with his middle son, Jeff Severino. To this day, one of the greatest athletes, natural athletes I've ever been able to play with. He went to Air Force, left after 2 years, didn't sign his 2 for 7. But he went to Air Force, picked off Brian Broadwater in a JV game. Shout out to B-Water. But when we were playing against their JV team, actually covering Ryan Reed, who was one of the best receivers we played with, but he transferred to Boston College. And then my best friend went on to play at Boston College. And then we had 2 guys that went to play at Missouri State. Another guy went and played at Rollin. Another guy went and played at K-State. So we had 6 guys signed D1 or 1 AA letters of intent, and then 1 guy signed a D2 or 3, whatever Rolla was, letter of intent. And I backed up 2 of those guys. I backed up the center on offense, and I backed up my best friend at D tackle on defense. And I just long snapped. Kind of like Joe said in his podcast, right? I mean, I was a pretty mediocre football player, but I could just throw the ball upside down and backwards really fucking well.
Yeah, I mean, that niche is important, I think.
So I get to the academy, and even though my dad went to the academy, plebe summer was still a punch in the face. I lost 33 pounds over plebe summer, came in at 231, dropped to 198. But playing in JV games as a plebe, so I got to travel my whole plebe year and playing JV games. So I got the best of both worlds, especially since we went 9-3 and won the Aloha Bowl and all that kind of stuff. I saw all of that. And the class of 97, you guys have said it a few times. I know Matt Nichak or both Nichak and especially Cam have talked about that being sort of the Godfather class. And for modern Navy football, it really is. I mean, they got 2 years with Paul Johnson. I only got 1. But Paul Johnson is the reason that Navy football turned around. He left.
No doubt.
We started to dip. We got a new athletic director in Chet Gladchuk, who replaced. I can't believe I'm brain farting on this, but the coach at Marshall that they made a movie about. That was our former, not obviously Matthew McConaughey who played him, but
the Naval Academy is a training ground for coaches to go somewhere else.
No, but he wasn't a coach. He was our athletic director at the time.
Yeah, no,
and
similar
so
concept.
Yeah, right. But he retired, and I'll think of his name at some random point during all this. But he retired, and Chet Glatchuk came in, and the first thing Chet did, at least the story I've always heard, I don't think I've confirmed this, but he called Ben Fay, he called Clint Bruce, he called the leaders of that team and that class, and said, what happened, and why have we fallen so far so fast, and what do you attribute our success to from you guys going 9-3 and winning the Aloha Bowl, and the next thing you know, we hire Paul Johnson.
Makes sense.
And it made all the sense in the world. And
What do you remember about him from when he came into the program?
so, like I said, so his first year was my senior year in high school. I did not go to NAPS, so my plebe year was his second year. And being a sole special teamer, I never went through fourth quarters with PJ because he was just there for the first semester, and then he was off to Georgia Southern. But what I remember from him and from the coaches that were there with him in the beginning was the switch, right? I mean, those guys loved you. They cared about you. They would do anything for you other than for the 2 hours during which you're between the lines. And at that time, it's not about you. Ever.
Right.
It's about this team, and it's about preparing this team to win on Saturday or Thursday, whenever your game is. And so it was all business all the time. Don't take it personal, and I'm going to rip every single thing you do to shreds because my expectation, the minimum standard is higher than you could ever imagine without me as your coach. That was what they did. And I think the type of person that goes to the Naval Academy responds to that in a very different way than the average human being.
Gotcha.
And if you don't respond in a good way, you leave.
Yep.
And everybody's better for that.
Up or out, right?
Up or out. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So I had a roller coaster career there. Like I said, I got to travel and back up a great guy. I mean, phenomenal human being. You talk to the class of 97 about the quality of human being of Lester Fortney, and it'd be hard to argue there's a better person on the team than Lester Fortney. So he was Beef Dressler's backup at center, but then he also was the starting long snapper. He's from a small town, North Carolina. I think he actually lives back in North Carolina now. I may have seen him twice in my entire life where he didn't have a smile on his face, and just consummate Christian Southerner, just a great, great man. And so he was my, that's who I was trying to become as the starter. And I can't remember if it was my senior year in high school or my freshman year at the academy. One of those 2 years is when they made the rule that you're no longer allowed to tee off on the long snapper. And before that, I'd spent my whole high school career just getting rolled up. And so I was constantly trying to get bigger and stronger to prevent that. But when I snapped, I looked the whole time. And I walked in to two-a-days my sophomore year, and Tommy Ray, who, Brad Chatlos and a lot of other linebackers have talked about, another just phenomenal human being. He was our linebackers coach, and he was the punt team coach. He's like, "Hey, Doug, we're gonna give you a blocking assignment this year." And I'm coming into the season projected to be the starter as a sophomore. And I said, "What do you mean, coach?" Now, this is like the day before two-a-days start. Yeah, we're gonna have you go ahead and block somebody this year. They can't hit you anymore, so we're just gonna go ahead and have you block somebody this year. That won't be a problem, will it? I said, well,
Yep.
we'll find out. And
Sounds like lean manufacturing.
yeah, so I learned real quick. You can't have your head between your legs and block anybody because they're moving around, they're doing stuff, and it took me that entire season to figure it out, and then some. I mean, I ended up in a JV, so I did not start. Dave Vidger, class of '98, who played D tackle and eventually went on to the league, play offensive guard.
Awesome.
Could probably still be in the
Miami
league.
Dolphins,
Jets and the Dolphins.
Jets and the Dolphins. I think I've
With
seen that guy. And yeah,
definitely the Jets. In one of your episodes, somebody told you had to watch the program.
yep, I did.
He's real life Latimer in terms of physical stature. He was a physical specimen. Starting D tackle, absolute chiseled specimen. 290, whatever he was, pounds of just block of muscle. And Dave had the ability to long snap, like literally wake up, get out of bed, and throw a strike for the NFL. I mean, it just was very simple, easy, and natural for him, or at least that's the way he made it seem. And they didn't even travel a backup that year. It wouldn't have mattered if they did. I fell so far down the depth chart, it wouldn't have mattered. At one point in a JV game, I snapped a ball over the punter's head. The only time in an actual game I've ever done that before. That was in a JV game, and then I didn't even start the rest of the season on the JV team. I got passed up for that.
Hmm. No, I definitely played my fair share of JV games. So
I had a hard time figuring that whole thing out. So I eventually figured it out, and then started my junior senior year. I missed my start for the Wake Forest. I think it was the Thursday night ESPN game of the week, opening of our. That was Chad Lowe's senior season, so the '98 season, because I got suspended from the team for doing stupid stuff over the summer, and so that whole year was just that was tough. That was a lot of tough stuff.
yeah, any learnings out of that summer tuition that you had to pay? I mean, I've definitely paid the tuition one summer.
Oh yeah. So I got in trouble. Well, the trouble happened during cruise, but
Yep.
I didn't have to fess up to it until reform, and so I paid the piper from like September through Thanksgiving, and the deptant rung me up like just below threshold to where I wouldn't get my black end. I had all the pain required of a black end, but not enough data for a black end. So, that was kind of disappointing. That same deptant eventually got fired for a very similar incident to the one that I got in trouble for. So I think there was that. Yeah, exactly. I think there was some mutual understanding in there somewhere, but he was a good guy. I can't complain. And our O-rep at the time, Corky Gardner, helicopter pilot, flew an HM1 just like Horn did and all that stuff. HMX1 was just phenomenal and made sure that I got through it with the least amount of pain possible. But that hurt. Not starting in that game and having to stand up and tell the team that what I had done over the summer was going to cost us that. That sucked, and it straightened me out. Not so much the event, but having to stand up in front of the team and tell them all of that, because most of them had no idea. So my very last day of restriction was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving break. I was on loss of leave, so that didn't matter. But at least I wasn't going to have to stand inspection on, or restriction inspection on Thanksgiving Day. And we had a 4 a.m. or whatever the crazy thing was. I don't know if you guys ever did this,
Muster. Yeah.
but the Wednesday before Thanksgiving break, we would practice, have a full-fledged practice
Gotcha.
before class. We'd show up at like 4:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I nearly forgot about my last inspection. So I'm sprinting to the rotunda to get to my last inspection. And SDBs, I show up, and the absolute worst possible company officer in the brigade. This guy hated me. I don't remember what he was in the Marine Corps. He was a captain in the Marine Corps, but I don't remember what his MOS was. Captain Fiacco. And he hated me. Absolutely hated me.
Why do you think he hated you?
He was not a big fan of football players in general, but he had, I don't know, to this day, I kind of take it as a badge of honor. He was the third company officer, and I was in second company. I really don't even know how well or how he knew me, but he had figured it out.
Yeah, well, you must have been doing something right then.
Dude, this guy did not like me. Did not like me. I pushed a lot of limits. But anyway, we're going through inspecting everybody, and a member of his company is in the restriction muster, and he's not on restriction. And that was a guy named Murph McCarthy. Murph was our class president, prior enlisted Marine, went to NAPS, played football, cracked his helmet against a guy named Mike Wall.
Sounds like Justin North.
Yes, exactly. And then he went and played rugby. And now he's
just like Justin North. I think North did too.
Right, exactly. And I coached Justin when I was back at the academy. So I know Justin well. Love that kid. And then Murph is now the women's rugby coach at Navy and has won 1 or 2 national championships.
Awesome.
But Murph is, so I'm like, dude, and he's just sitting there, and he's the biggest clown you've ever met. So he's smirking and laughing, and I go to the next guy. Now Fiacco is in front of Murph, and he's like, Mr. McCarthy, what are you doing here? Sir, I'm here in honor of Midshipman Martin's final restriction muster. Who said it was his final restriction muster? Sir, I have faith in you and Midshipman Martin that this will be his final restriction. Yeah, we'll see about that. And I'm like, oh my God, Murph, I've been on this for 46 days. Like, what are you're killing me here, man. But we got through it, and then he and a guy named Pete Moeller, another footballer who was a Brotherhood guy, he's class of 2001, dragged me all around the Christmas tree and everything else and ruined my uniform. And that was my last day of restriction. So,
gotcha.
But anyway, we had a pretty uneventful rest of that year. We went 3-8, and then our senior year got off to just a terrible start. We hosted Georgia Tech, got our asses kicked by Georgia Tech, and I remember being probably the most angry I've ever been in my life after that game.
Is that when Paul Johnson was back there?
No, this was long before he was back. And I mean, this is when we were pulling out all the stops, right? We were trying to salvage everything, added a tight end. We were doing everything we can to try to rebuild the team. So many of the assistants had left at that point. Had a ton of new assistant coaches, and we just got waxed at home by Georgia Tech, and we had a players-only meeting that next week, and I don't remember everything about what I said, but I know I said something to the tune of, look, I know I'm only a deep snapper and I have absolutely no leg to stand on here. I definitely started with that, but if this isn't your...
Lead with humility, right?
But if this place isn't your priority, get out. If academics are your priority, if the hall is your priority, if like those things all comes second to here, because this is what we bled and sweat for. This right here. We do those things so that we can be here. And if it's not your priority, then get out. And a lot of guys, Terrence, Dave, a lot of guys got up and talked during that piece. Jamie Dolfmeyer. Jamie was our defensive team captain, another just salt of the earth human being. He was a dual sport guy too. He played lacrosse our sophomore and our senior year. A lot of opponents on the lacrosse field didn't make it out of their stadium with their team because of Jamie Dolfmeyer. He played free safety and just destroyed people on the lacrosse field.
I got a lot of respect for lacrosse.
Oh, what an amazing sport! What an amazing sport! And but we ended up losing the rest of our games that we lost that year by 7 points or less. And I think I mentioned to you the Notre Dame game, which if you haven't gotten a chance to go back and watch that, yeah, unbelievable. I mean, it's not a first down. You give us a challenge flag and we break the streak before you guys were fortunate enough to break the streak. And when you guys broke the streak, we had just played a rugby match against Kutztown, Pennsylvania. And you remember Craig Almond? Do you remember 08 guy named Craig Almond? No. So Craig's brotherhood guy played football for a couple years, blew out his knee, couldn't get back on the field, switched to rugby, and he's now a P3 NFO. He's still in. And I remember we were in some dirty bar on the side of the road, pulled the entire bus over to go in and watch you guys finish the job against Notre Dame in 2007. And Craig and I were just hugging each other for like 10 minutes. I mean, it was just, something that you just didn't understand unless you had been there before to really understand it. And that was just amazing. That was awesome.
Yeah. So good memory for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on that. And you got to do it twice. I think I saw both of them.
Awesome.
And I got to see us beat them in Jacksonville, 2000, was that 15 or 16? So I think I saw us beat them up in New York too. Yeah, I think I've seen us beat them. Well, in person, I think I've seen us beat them 2 or 3 times, but just that'll never get old, especially when almost 10% of my graduating class went to Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, big story big lover of the underdog story personally, and I always look for that, and that's what gives me energy. So
anyways, we belabored on the academy. I'll try to get through the rest of this. The other big part of the academy for me was after my plebe year, they sent us all to new companies. And the company I ended up in, as a youngster, as a sophomore, I was the oldest football player in the company. That sucked.
Yeah, you don't have some of that top cover.
Yeah, well, and I had no roommates, right? It was I didn't know anybody. I had no idea, and so I got to know the brigade real quick in my company, and found some of the greatest people you'll ever meet. Drew Jones, B.A. Jones, was my roommate for 3 years. Godfather of my daughter, Kyle Shoup, ended up being my roommate for a year and a half or 2 years. I think it was a year and a half. My last year and a half there, ended up being best player on our rugby squad, which was loaded with phenomenal talent, and had a few other guys come and go, Dan Crowley and Josh Powers, at the end, and just such great dudes, and that I think prepared me better for the transition to the fleet than anything, because I got to the fleet and I'm in flight school, and I knew one guy in my flight school class because he was my roommate. He was long pole All-American lacrosse player named Chad Donnelly. I'm like, Chad, how do we get screwed with all the OCS and like ROTC guys? Like, who are all these dudes? And he's like, you're such an idiot. Everybody in here went to the academy. And I'm like, oh God. So I knew no one. I just didn't know anybody. And you've heard, Jordan and Nick Henderson and a couple other guys talk about it. Most of us don't go fly. Most of the football guys don't go fly. So it makes you realize really quick just how small of a group of people you knew at the academy, because your time was so consumed with something else. And then your
Yeah.
social time, that's who you went and spent your time with. So you get to know a whole different group of people really quick. I was really fortunate. I wanted to go P3s. I got to go P3s. P3 is, as you may or may not have heard, but P3 stands for per diem, per diem, per diem. And that's no
Good for
joke.
you.
$115 a day, tax-free in Bahrain, while your buddies are flying off the boat. It makes no sense, but I'll take it all day, every day. And, I got P3s. I went through flight school. All I wanted to do was deploy to Europe. Prior to 9/11, that was my only concern. And so I put in all my requests and all that kind of stuff. Turns out I didn't get anything. In fact, I was so far from getting anything that I requested, they pulled me and that guy B. Lee in and said, hey, neither of you have your top 4 available. So we have 2 options available. You 2 figure out which one you want. And so one was a Hawaii slot, one was a Whidbey Island slot. And I just looked at B. Lee and said, hey man, you pick. I don't care. You take whichever one you want. And he's like, really? I said, honestly,
Yeah,
I don't care.
it's funny how that works. Like when you want it, it doesn't happen. When you don't want it, it happens.
Yeah. And I've listened to your MOS story a lot, right? And so I ended up going to Whidbey Island. Single greatest thing that could ever happen to me. I was in the best squadron at the best time. I deployed to the Middle East in December of 2002. We invaded Iraq March 2003. The night that we invaded Iraq, I was overland Iraq with special people on board wanting to talk to their special people on the ground. And I had a front row seat to the march to Baghdad. I saw it every other day. I was flying deeper and deeper into combat. That first night, we got lit up like a Christmas tree. They were shooting missiles and everything at us. Shocked a lot of people into reality really fast. I was still too young and naive and cocky to be shocked into reality. I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. It was just an absolutely amazing deployment. And then we went back from that and had a change of command. And that new CO, who was our XO, and he was actually on that flight with me when we got shot at, Fast Eddie Campbell. And then the next XO, who became our next CO, Scott Mav Coolidge, were 2 just pivotal mentors in my life. Taught me everything I needed to know about the Navy on a big scale at that point. And my, Monty Willie was he was the first warrant officer to be allowed to become a naval flight officer in the P3 community. And he was
awesome.
Yeah, he was a door gunner in Desert Storm as a rescue swimmer, flying Hueys, and now he's teaching me how to be a P3 NFO. Right, so I get the whole, there's no such thing as luck. It's preparation and opportunity coming together. No, I didn't want to go to Whidbey Island. The Navy sent me to Whidbey Island. I had no clue what squadron I was going to get. That's who I got sat with. Now, I could have been unprepared and an idiot to take advantage of it, yes. But I was lucky that they were there to give me an opportunity to take advantage of a situation. And so that was just amazing. If I could have extended in that tour, I'd still be there. I would have never left. I would have just left every 12 months, gone on deployment, fought wars, kicked ass, flown that plane till I died. It was absolutely unbelievable. We were doing great stuff. Our second deployment, we went to the Pacific, and I got to find and track out of area deployers from big bad countries and lead debt detachments, to other countries, Thailand, South Korea, Singapore. We went all over the place. It was more responsibility than any 25-year-old should ever be, granted. And it was awesome. And then after that, I wanted to be an admiral's aide because
Why?
I figured I had two shots at seeing it from an admiral's perspective.
Okay.
Either be an aide or be an admiral. And I figured I'd screw up way too bad before I could ever become an admiral. And I had the paperwork
True.
to become an aide. And it was tough. The first guy I went and interviewed with is actually a classmate of mine's dad. And I didn't know my classmate, that classmate, very well at all. But I went out and interviewed with him, and he was a nuke submariner. And I had talked to a buddy of my dad's right before I went out there, and he said, hey, and he was an admiral. And one of my best friends from my squadron was his aide at the time. I helped him get that job. And he said, listen, you're interviewing him as much as he's interviewing you. If it's not a fit,
Yep.
don't take the job.
100%.
So went out and flew to Hawaii, interviewed with him, and I just started praying that he wouldn't offer me the job because we had absolutely nothing in common. I mean, this guy and I were black and white, oil and water. It was never going to work. And as luck would have it, he calls me on my cell phone. I'm at Duke's down in Waikiki. So I'm literally sprinting to find a quiet place so he doesn't know that I'm in a bar taking this phone call. And he's like, hey, Doug, I just wanted to let you know I've decided to go in a different direction. I said, Admiral, you've made the right choice. Click, start the process over. Next guy I interviewed with was going to be Chief Naval Forces of Japan. And we had a 2-hour interview over the phone in which he all but said I was his guy, but that he had one interview left that he had to take because it was already set up. I don't hear from this guy for weeks. All I know is I don't get the job, and I'm back in the pipeline working it again. I get a phone call like at 5 o'clock in the morning one day, and it was him. And he said, hey, sorry it's been so long, but I just wanted to let you know you're all set. You're gonna interview soon. You're gonna get this job, and you're gonna be fine. But the guy that I interviewed after you grew up as the son of the command master chief of
Yeah. Some politics there.
of Yokosuka, and he's fluent in Japanese. And he's like, I didn't miss that right in your resume. You're not fluent in Japanese. I was like, Admiral, konnichiwa. That's about all I got. So after that, I don't have any Japanese. I said, I'm sure you made the right choice, but I don't know what to tell you because I've got an interview set up, and I hope this doesn't conflict with what you're working on. He said, well, who are you going to interview with? I said, Commander Carrier Striker Bait, Al Myers. He said, you're all set. Don't worry about it. So I went out, interviewed with Matt Al Myers, and the rest of that was history. And I learned everything I needed to know about being a professional in life, in business, in the Navy, everything. The man was just a relentless professional. No detail. We would spend hour and a half sometimes writing a 4-sentence email together. And then we'd go up on the flag bridge and smoke a cigar. I mean, the guy was just incredible. He was an Air Force Academy grad that immediately went to the Navy. His dad had been a colonel in the Air Force. He wanted a different path. He was an F4 Rio, so had a similar background to my dad. We understood the whole NFO thing. He worked out like a champ. So that was easy, and I I got him, he got me. We just got really lucky, and that was incredible. And so he had 3 chiefs of staff during his time, which is very unusual. The first one was a carryover from his predecessor. That's normal. But then you get one, you keep them. But for him, he got one, and that guy went on to be a Helo Squadron Commodore. So he left. And then the third, no, I'm sorry. That was the third one that he had, was the Helo Squadron Commodore. The second one he got was Peg Klein. And she ended
Rings a
up
bell.
becoming, yeah, she ended up becoming the Mamadant, right? So I got to meet her and know her, and eventually got to know her husband, who was a P3 skipper, Frank, and a physics instructor back at the academy during your time. I don't know if you ever got to meet Frank, but
Probably.
Skipper Frank is, another level. I mean, the guy was just absolutely amazing. And actually, I'm pretty sure Peg Klein was Ben Fay's CO when Ben flew E6s.
Nice.
But what a phenomenal lady. I called
Yeah.
her and I said, hey, I want to go to the academy. She's like, okay, come be a company officer. And I started having all these flashbacks of all the battalion officers that I had as a midshipman. I want nothing to do with that as a boss. I said, I'll be a company officer if I can report directly to you. She's like, I can't do that. I said, great, then find me a different job. So she got me a job at the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership, working for Art Athens, who is probably the single greatest human being I've ever met in my life.
Awesome.
And if you never got a chance to know Art Athens, father of 10,
Sounds like Jax.
yeah, homeschooled almost all of them, at least until high school. Then they gave him a choice. He was a brigade commander and captain of the lacrosse team, class of 78. He served as the CEO of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He served as, or Officers of Christian Fellowship, but I can't remember which one. He was the commandant of the Merchant Marine Academy. He did 15 years active duty and 15 years reserves in the Marine Corps. At one point, he had 2 sons in high school, and their high school coach quit the first week of the season, of lacrosse season. So he volunteered to coach the team, and they won the state championship.
Nice.
I mean, everything he touched was gold. I mean, the guy was just unbelievable, and he set me up to where I am today. So he taught me how to be a consultant before I ever became a consultant, showed me the path of how my personality worked as a consultant before I knew what being a consultant meant. Even though my dad had owned and ran a consulting firm, I still didn't really truly understand it. He knew me so much better than I knew myself in a professional manner, and he saw it so well and could explain it so well. I mean, I owe him a tremendous amount, and then got to work with a lot of other great people there. Dan Healy and other guys that I still keep in touch with, but it was just awesome.
So,
And I should have warned you. So I've listened to every single one of your podcasts,
nice.
100% of them, except Cliff, because I don't think Cliff's been posted yet.
I just put it out.
Oh, good. So I'll listen to it soon. But Hunter Jones, unique thing. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do everything I can to be a little shorter than Hunter. However, I could easily go longer than Hunter, no problem. But Hunter Jones, class of 97, number 65, makes the decision during 2-a-days. He can't do it. He just physically can't play. He's physically too jacked up. And so at the time, our manager was a guy named Kevin Bull. And Kevin Bull was like the Paul Johnson of managers. We had the shittiest equipment. We had the worst customer service you could ever imagine. I mean, the guy just did not give two craps about you, your problems, nothing. And he just walks out one day and goes, "You're number 65 now. You're in locker 65. Get your crap, go to 65." I mean, I'm a plebe. I think it was still during two-a-days. Maybe right after two-a-days. But I mean, it was close. And I'm surrounded, there's like two or three of us to a locker, in the old locker room. And everybody's looking at me. I'm like, "Hey guys, I don't know." So I just grab all my crap. I walk over to 65. Hunter's still getting his stuff out of his locker. And he's a mammoth of a human being. And I'm, not even 200 pounds at this point because I've lost so much weight. And I said, "Hey man, I'm so sorry. They just told me to move over." He's like, No. Welcome. Wear with pride. Do me proud.
Nice.
Yeah. And that was my introduction to the trailer park. So that's what we called our area. And I was very fortunate. I got to spend 4 years in the trailer park with class of 96 to class of 03. Eventually. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So, yeah, go ahead. Ask your question.
So I got to ask more about the consulting gig because I've done a couple consulting interviews. It was originally something that I thought I'd probably be pretty good at, with the background, experience, whatever. But when I go through the interviews, I'm like, no. One, typically in any big consulting thing, you have to start out at a X level, and kind of like go through some cycles, prove your worth, up or out. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather get back into the operation and just run it.
Okay.
There was this one outlier, and this one outlier required a secret security clearance. It's like, oh, I got one of those. Nope, it expired. So I had the interview lined up, and then the day of, it got canceled because the secret clearance
Expired,
wasn't
yeah.
exactly. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, like if it was that important, it probably could have been. It probably could have happened, right? Like so.
So let me tell you a couple of things about consulting because I've heard a few people bash and I get it.
Yeah, I was one of them at one
I
point.
know you're the biggest basher. So
Because I've been there.
so here's the thing. Here's the thing about consulting and full transparency. I get it. I totally get it. So number one, the first thing to remember is consultants are hired to do a specific thing, and the more expensive that particular consultant or consultancy is, the more conscious the company that hires them are of keeping them to their scope.
Got it.
So if they get hired to answer the question, how do we cut costs? How do we become more efficient? How do we do specific things? Then they're going to go find the potential answers to those things, and that's it.
Yeah.
If their scope is how do we and what are the risks in doing so, then they'll provide that answer. But if the scope doesn't include and what are the risks in doing so, you don't want to pay McKinsey another $850 or $1,000 an hour to provide you an answer to a question you didn't ask.
Yeah.
So that's the danger in hiring the big ones, right?
Yeah.
Your experience is in a niche place, and I guarantee you there are consulting firms you've never heard of that specialize in helping mid and small sized plants run more efficiently based on the lessons learned by people that have experience working for Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies in similar situations.
Gotcha.
That's where you would be a rock star. Absolutely be a rock star. You just got to go find those companies and then
Yeah.
find the network into those companies.
I feel like
But
my experience inside of like inner city America is pretty good from a frontline standpoint, turnover, recruiting, and all that kind of stuff. Been through the whole gamut of that.
mm-hmm.
And so when a McKinsey comes in, or when a big consultant company comes in and says, "Hey, we're going to cut all these headcount," in my mind, I'm thinking, "No, I need the supervision."
Yeah.
Because when the cats are, you know, dogs
Enough
away,
said.
cats will play. Like that is, I think, a very important factor based off of environment and something I've been, working through, struggling with throughout the
Well,
whole process.
well,
So
the first thing that McKinsey or BCG or Bain, any of those big guys would do, they wouldn't actually do.
BCG, BCG was the one that reached out to me with that whole security clearance issue that I
There you
had.
go.
I was like super
So,
excited about it,
oh yeah,
but
so I've gone
fell
through all
through.
this stuff. So, but the first thing they would do, if you put a cloak and dagger over the whole thing, and they didn't know what organization they were looking at, they'd tell you to cut first sergeants and gunnery sergeants and staff sergeants. I mean,
Yeah,
they get
understood.
everything they get everything to their numbers, right? To whatever they think the number should be. But they would never go tell the Navy or the Marine Corps to actually do that, because that would
Yeah,
severely limit the number of future opportunities they ever got to work with those
yeah.
departments.
It's
And
about cutting costs. It's not about
right,
growth
it's too
development.
expensive to do.
Yeah.
Well, I was having a conversation today with one of my colleagues, and I said, the driver shortage is real, which
I
you
feel you.
understand that. You understand that, right?
Yeah,
And in the school bus industry or the fleet industry, it's real. It is an absolute thing. But there's both a supply and a demand side to the driver shortage. And on the supply side, it's not just about recruiting. You don't have to recruit as much if you don't lose as much. So you start with retention.
yep,
And to your point, you start taking away access to the top and lines of communication of people that care about the front line and empathize with their situation and understand their situation. People bail faster.
ShamWow.
There's all sorts of things that consultants can do to help you try to become better on the demand side in terms of efficiency. But on the supply side, it starts with retention. And that's all about taking care of your people.
Yeah,
You got to take care of your people.
no doubt. All right, so what comes next after the whole consultancy thing? I think that's where we left off.
Well, yeah. So I spent my time at the academy. At the academy, I got to be an associate director of Stockdale Center and work for Colonel Athens. I got to teach plebe leadership and teach a bunch of your classmates. I got to work with the football team in the weight room, which is where I got to know some of you guys. I got to know the JV guys a lot better than the other guys, because you guys would lift during lunch. That was when I was over there, was during lunch. I got to coach rugby which was absolutely amazing. And I got to meet guys like Craig Allman and Justin North and countless others.
Elliot Hosies,
Just Elliot Josie's
Josies.
and his
He works for
partner.
McKinsey right now, I think.
Well, and his partner in crime, Kyle Millard. Did you
Ooh,
know?
Kyle Miller. I remembered him being a baller. Oh
Shout
yeah,
out,
yes.
shocker.
Hey, it's on my
Send a
LinkedIn.
shocker. So he's a P3 pilot, and it took me two years to get Kyle to stop trying to be um, a bullpen pitcher and learn how to hit people for a living. And he became just an awesome rugby player. Played a lot of rugby after he actually left the academy. He was the
Nice.
biggest. He was the tallest dude on the team and the
Yep.
fastest.
I think he was taller. He was
And
definitely taller than me.
oh, he's like 6'5", 6'6",
Yeah, big
and
dude.
and and on a good day, he could beat Josie's in a 40 or a 50, and it ripped Josie's apart. Uh, Anthony Varvudis spent some time as a long snapper on the football team before he walked on, made the team, and then eventually was like, I think I was having more fun playing rugby, and he came back. But I mean, just so many dudes that I got to mentor and coach, and that was the best part about being back there was, I paced the PRT for you guys. I don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah, you're probably ahead of me. So
oh no,
I don't remember.
I finished at 10:29 every single time I ran it, and I'd get the group together and I'd tell them all because I'd wait for the coaches to leave because if you remember, we would start by the turf field entrance,
Yep.
right, where Rip Miller's, and then you'd run, about that first half of a lap, and that's where you'd finish. And the coaches were all there. They're all watching their clocks, and they're all yelling at you
Yelling at you. Yeah.
and me
Like,
that we're not running fast enough. And after about 3 times, the coaches finally settled down because they realized that I never failed the PRT, pacing you guys. So if everybody stayed with me, they were going to be fine. But what they don't understand is that if you blow it early, you can't recover while you're running.
yep.
It's gone. If you're going to sprint, you start sprinting at the sailing center and you finish. But you don't start sprinting or running anywhere near the pace that you need to be running in that first lap.
It's a
Because
different beast because like when
it's
you
not what you're trained to
you
do.
train to be a sprinter, and then all of a sudden you have to pass this endurance test.
You know who had the most trouble passing that thing?
Who?
Kaipo.
Oh, trying to get him on here too.
Kaipo, his back would just tighten up. Kaipo's back would tighten up. I'm trying to remember the fullback's name that was smart as hell. You haven't had him yet on here either, but you've talked about him a couple times. He really struggled. No. He was a second or third string guy.
Okay.
Really smart.
Hatcher.
Yes. Like, nicest guy on the planet, kid. Never said a bad thing about anybody.
No,
kid.
awesome dude.
Right? I mean, just also, he's doing great stuff now too. I see him on LinkedIn every once in a while. But man, he struggled with that thing. Just struggled.
Yep.
The big guys didn't struggle because they were back where I was when I was playing on the bike, puking in a trash can. It was all the guys that actually had to run that damn mile and a half in 10:30. It's like, guys,
dude.
And I was like, dude, just stay right here. Just stay right here. If you stay with me, we'll be fine. And I would run that PRT at 2-a-days. I'd run it 3, 4, 5 days in a row until the last one of you passed it because they make you take it every day until you passed it because you weren't allowed to practice or whatever until you passed it. And it was a mess.
PRT was always a mess for me. It was one of those things that I dreaded and just pushed through, barely made it, and then it's kind of like the grades back then. But
I love doing that for you guys because I knew how much it sucked. I knew. As a midshipman, I ran it twice. I ran at the end of plebe summer, and I ran it to graduate in February, and I ran it 10:28 both times.
Nice.
But anyway, so I got to coach. I got my master's. I got an MBA with a finance and accounting, and I dated my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, long distance between Stockholm, Sweden, and Annapolis. And so I had no time to do anything else. I, I helped run the Stockdale Center. I taught, I coached, I studied. And then when I found a free moment, I'd talk to her on Facebook or on the phone. And then every free piece of time I had, I'd fly to Stockholm or she'd fly to Annapolis. And it was just awesome. And then at that point, I thought I would probably stay in the Navy forever, essentially. I mean, I was loving it. And then things started to change. Like the political correctness of the Navy became the priority of the Navy. And I started having to answer questions for guys that I didn't know how to answer in class. And that's when I realized, like, look, if I'm absolutely loving getting my MBA. I'm loving reading the Wall Street Journal every day. I hate NATOPS, which is basically the aviator's Bible. I love the tactics side, but I hated the airplane side. Absolutely despised it. And I was like, look, if you're going to stay in and be competitive and do what you want to eventually go do, which is be a skipper of a squadron, then you need to either leave this tour a year early or go immediately from it and go to Afghanistan or Iraq as an IA. That was back when the individual augmentee thing was big in the Navy. I was like, you're going to have to go do that to keep your paperwork in line. All your paperwork up till now is good, but this is going to hurt being in this shore duty. So I'm going to have to go do that. And then I'm going to have to get lucky as a department head in terms of who my skipper is. Because if I don't see eye to eye to him, I'll get ranked last. I mean, it was a first to last thing, right? I get ranked first to last. And meanwhile, I've just ripped this girl out of her country. And while she was supportive no matter what I would decide to go do, I just decided it's time to punch. And that was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I spent 2 years where every waking moment of the day that I was not actively thinking about something else, I could not think about anything else other than should I stay in or get out. That's all I thought about constantly. And when I finally made the decision, I decided, okay, I'm going to get out. Boom. Done. Now what am I going to go do? And I narrowed it down to joining my dad's firm, going and taking a shot at the big three, BCG, Bain, McKinsey, or starting my own thing with these two classmates of mine from the academy. And that's ultimately the way that things went.
Yeah.
Did that for about 5 years. And during that time, we invested in my dad's firm. And then ultimately ended up taking over my dad's firm, but under a different set of circumstances. So, and that's where I am today.
Awesome. Well, you talked about that thought process of like, should I get out, and how you were thinking about it. Like, once you made that leap, once you made that jump, what kind of things were you thankful for, or learned about?
It's a great question, Tony. I think the first thing I was thankful for was the support. Uh, Everybody from my past, and because I was not excited. I was dreading going and telling uh, my former mentors and leaders that, hey, I've decided I'm going to punch. I was really dreading that. And to a person, they all were very, very supportive of the decision. The only thing that they asked was that I strongly consider staying in the reserves, which I was very against in the beginning. And of course, I ended up staying in the reserves for 10 years and retiring from the reserves. But I was very against it in the beginning because I didn't think I could do anything half-ass. And I was worried that, it was all or nothing sort of a thing. And I'm so glad that they made me take a second, third, and fourth look at that. So that's probably the first thing I was thankful for. The second thing was just the patience of my partners, my original partners, and me getting, because I started working for them while I was still active duty, and then through the transition and just helping me learn what it meant to not be in the Navy, even though we were still working primarily for the Navy. That was a huge help. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, over the last 13 years is I was very blessed throughout my naval career with the best leaders I could have ever asked for. And while I've had good leaders and peers in this world as well, it's not the same. It's just different. And unless you've lived in that world, you don't get it or understand it. You can't possibly comprehend it. And so it's no fault on anyone, that I've worked with or for since, but what we've experienced is different, and it's special. And so if your expectation is that high, you're going to constantly be at least a little disappointed. So you have to learn to adjust that expectation.
Gotcha.
That's for sure.
Good stuff. So, looking back on your career, was there a specific grow up moment for you? Like, yeah, all right, you already got something in the works.
So when I was an aide, a buddy of mine and I went out one night and we had a whole plan, right? We ORM'd it, so to speak, right? Put the
Risk
little OR,
management.
operational risk management matrix to work, and we went downtown Norfolk. Long story short, we end up breaking up a fight we had nothing to do with in a bar, but in the process of breaking up this fight, everyone gets booted out of this bar, which is fine. And so we get in a cab to go home, and somebody else opens the door. Like, we're literally about to pull away. Somebody else opens the door, starts screaming that we've stolen their cab. And we're just in anti-confrontation mode at this point, right?
Good for you.
And so we're like, hey, man, no problem. So we get out, and the cop turns around, and it's like, I thought we told everybody to get out of here. And we're just like, look, man, we're just, we're doing everything we can to get out of here. And we explain the situation. Long story short, we both realized, like, hey, we got a great thing going here with this whole Navy thing. We're both in a very good spot with where we are in our careers, and we just can't be putting ourselves in these positions anymore like idiots. Like, it's not worth it. It's just absolutely not worth it. And so even a best laid plan can go to crap in a heartbeat, and you're putting a lot of people. And at the time, he's single, I'm single. It's not like I hadn't even met my wife yet. It's not like we weren't even dating or anything at the time. But I'm putting my boss's reputation on the line. He's putting his boss's reputation on the line, like all that kind of stuff. You got to figure these things out a lot further in advance, and you got to make smarter decisions. Even though they're not fun decisions, you just got to make smarter decisions sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
That was definitely a grow up moment for
Gotcha.
sure.
Good stuff. How do you remain self aware? How do you remind yourself to stay on the right path?
My wife does a really good job of that.
It's funny. The last podcast I had was with my senior enlisted advisor for my company. He said the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Hasn't released yet.
yeah. She does a phenomenal job of that. I'm also phenomenally fortunate to have two guys that work with me that I went to high school with,
Nice.
and I mean, they know, they they cut through all of it. So
Yeah. They can
they,
cut like butter.
yeah, no, they have absolutely no problem putting me in my place. And then, of course, my original mentor is my father, who started our business, and he's still on the payroll, and he's the ultimate check and balance, right? I mean, if I've really got a question, or if I'm struggling with something or whatever, I can call Sir, and Sir sets everything straight pretty quick. Doesn't take long.
Good stuff. If you could go back and tell your younger self to do something different, what would you say?
So unlike a lot of your guests, I could build a list out of this stuff. I assumed until I was well into my 20s, probably at some point after graduation, that I just didn't have a cardiovascular system in my body, and that I couldn't. There was nothing in me that could ever actually be in cardiovascular shape, physical condition, and so that was my excuse for not being able to make the basketball team in high school. All sorts of stuff, and really it was just back to your price of admission, right? I didn't pay the price. I didn't work and earn that early enough. Listening to Joe Cardona's piece, as I'm sure you can imagine, I was fairly intrigued because there
Sure.
aren't a whole lot of us out there,
Yeah.
right? And there's about two or three things that Joe and I have in common, right? Besides being long snappers, one is he was a self-admitted mediocre football player outside of being a long snapper. Got it. Check. And the other is we've both been coached by Belichick. So Steve Belichick was still alive and well and kicking in Annapolis when I was coming through, and Coach Weatherby used to drive me, and I think it was Clint Brown, 2001 guy. I think he would drive me and Clint out into town because the NCAA rules, you were only allowed to have a certain number of coaches on campus, but there wasn't a rule about being coached off campus. So he would drive us into town to Germantown Elementary School and drop us off in a elementary school. We'd go in the grass in the field behind the school, and Steve Belichick would show up and coach us. The only
Nice.
long snapping
I'm
coach
gonna
I've
get him
ever
on
had in
here.
my life. Well, Steve's not with us anymore.
Oh, goodness.
I'm talking about Bill Belichick's dad.
Okay. Got it.
And he actually ended up helping Dave Vischer prepare for the NFL. But that guy, just as I'm sure you can imagine, no nonsense, straight to
Yeah. I mean,
business, all the time,
look at Bill, right?
and exactly, and just a, I mean, wealth of knowledge, and he got into like what our fingertips needed to be doing, from our hips to our chest to our glutes and quads, and how it all worked together as a system, and how where we put our hands on the ball, or the tilt of the ball in our hands, and how that could change the the destination of the ball and the spin rate on the ball, and a ridiculous amount of stuff. And I was so fortunate to be able to experience that. And, it got me to the point where on extra points and field goals, my goal was that Trey didn't have to turn the ball. He'd catch the ball, the laces would be up, so that when he put the ball down, the laces would be out. And I'd say our senior year, he probably had to spin less than a handful of balls.
Nice.
But that and that had nothing to do with me. That was all Steve Belichick.
Awesome.
It's like a recipe, All you got to do is go execute.
Yeah. If you could pull a string with Bill, ooh,
Ooh, well,
that'd be awesome.
Joe's going to pull a string with Bill long before I'm going to pull a string with Bill. You get Coach Kenny, you get Coach Niemann on here. He can pull a string possibly with Bill. I think he and Bill got pretty close. But
Yeah.
I've never met Coach Bill. I've never met Bill Belichick. I met Coach Belichick, and that's Steve Belichick.
Gotcha.
And I think that's how his son would put it.
Yeah. I'll send Coach Kenny a text after this.
So that's what I would tell that's what I tell the physical part of me, the intellectual part, and I think this. I don't think this ever stops being true. Just listen. Listen, and yeah, you got to follow your heart, but your mind has to be a check and balance on your heart. Because when the people you love and trust and respect are telling you something, they're not telling you that to make you mad. They're telling you that for a really good reason. Yeah. So listen with an open mind, and yeah, you still have to create your own path, and you still have to go out and do that. But I know a few people have said it before. You can learn a lot fewer things the hard way.
Yep.
If you just listen a little harder.
Yeah, no doubt. What's your biggest struggle today?
So this one I had to think about for a long time, and I think for me it's two things. One, the balance between never being satisfied, which was the first lesson I got from my high school football coach. Because once you're satisfied, you stop improving. So you can't ever be satisfied. And being appreciative of where you are. That's a hard thing to balance. I struggle with that most days, I would say, if not every day. And then, raising my kids. So my son is 11, my daughter's 12. She'll turn 13 actually in 2 months, just under 2 months. And Izzy and Lucas, and there's a great saying. It's a phenomenal saying. I think it had to be a midshipman that invented the saying back in the day. But the saying is, if the minimum wasn't enough, it wouldn't be the minimum. And there are two extreme ways to look at that quote. One is, yeah, well, just do the minimum and, eke your way through. The other way to look at it is, what do you set the minimum as? And I would argue men like Paul Johnson and Phil Emery, who you've heard referred to as Satan on this podcast, they would agree with, if the minimum wasn't enough, it wouldn't be the minimum. They would agree with that. Just make sure you're properly setting the minimum. Paul Johnson's minimum is well beyond most people's maximum. Well beyond. But he still had a minimum. We all still have one. Running a 10:30 mile and a half isn't easy. I don't care who you are. That's not a simple thing to do, but somebody decided that was the minimum. The Marine Corps decided that the minimum to max out pull-ups is 20. You got to do 20. Good luck. How many times you get 20? There might have been 2 times in my life I could have come close to getting to 20, maybe. Good Lord.
I'm getting close right now,
certainly,
but
yeah.
I've never done it in the past.
Oh no, I could have never done it when I was on active duty. No way. So, yeah, I think that's where I struggle, is setting a bar and an expectation for them, which is where my wife tries to keep me in check. My dad, again, he's very, very, very experienced and eloquent on some of these things. And he'll just tell me, son, look, you're trying to prepare them for independence, and she's trying to take care of them. You're on 2 completely opposite missions, and they're both equally important. True. Good luck. He's got no. There is no advice on how to balance it. The advice.
It's a dichotomy.
It's a dichotomy. It's a total dichotomy, and I think a lot of our brothers, missed that dichotomy.
Yeah.
They got raised by single moms or single parent households, mainly single moms. And in those situations, eventually there's a switch.
Yeah. It's never 50-50.
Where those
things change.
And those moms go, you know what? I don't have time to take care of them anymore. I just got to prep them to be a man. And those guys, there's a beauty and a curse to that. And the beauty of it is they get hard fast. It just takes them a lot longer to find some of the soft side sometimes. But they get hard fast.
No doubt. All right. Last question.
Uh-oh.
Here it comes.
Last sip.
What's your price of admission?
So, because I've listened to every single one of these things, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And also, I do need to give a couple shout outs real quick before I start to answer this.
Do it.
I got to thank Ben Fay and John Fay and Tim Shubsda for theirs, because in both of those, and you obviously, but in both of those, they talked about being concerned about society becoming too performance based, and I had to reflect on that big time. And I was definitely doing that both with my wife and my kids. And instead of valuing them for the people that they are, first and foremost, I was subconsciously viewing them through a performance lens, and it was completely and totally unfair and uncalled for. And so listening to those two podcasts, which were amongst the first two, if not the first two that I listened to, because I didn't listen to them in order at first. I just listened to the ones of the people that I knew.
Yeah.
Totally changed our dynamic here at home. So thank
Awesome.
you for that.
Yeah.
Now, the price of admission. So the price is a cost. By definition, that's a cost. And admission means to go from where you are to somewhere that you want to go. Sometimes that's free. I can walk outside my house and walk into the park, right? I mean, there's no, other than walking, there is no other cost. Now, that's still a cost. I got to exert some effort. But admission doesn't require more than that. Admission to something else might require more. So I think the price of admission in this case has gone a little bit undefined in terms of admission to what. If you want to be, the price of admission to the Brotherhood has actually been defined by Frank in terms of the Brotherhood itself, and it's, look, if you are a member of the team in any way, shape, or form, then you're welcome to join the Brotherhood. But I don't think that's what we're talking about on this podcast.
Yep.
And this is where this is where it really started to struggle, because you've also had guys on here that talk about the price of admission that either weren't in the Brotherhood at all, or didn't graduate for whatever the reason might have been.
Yeah.
So the more I thought about it, the more I got to the point where I think it's a cycle. The price of admission is a cycle, and that cycle never ends. It just repeats. And I think in general, the flow of the cycle follows the steps of earn, follow, lead, serve. And when you accomplish a goal, you start over. And you might be in a different part of the cycle in various parts of your life. And theoretically, you should be at different points in the cycle in various parts of your life at all times. And a lot of people fall out during the earn phase, or they'll fall out during the follow phase.
Most important, I think.
Or they'll fall out during the lead phase. But those of us that are lucky enough to get to the serve phase, you realize that serving is harder than all the other three combined. Because when you serve, you earn, you lead, and you follow every day. And that's when you realize that rank is of little importance, that status is of little importance, and that you can be led by your child just as easily as you can be led by your father. You can be led by a bus driver just as easily as you can be led by the CEO. But then you start to figure out, and you continue to polish what it means to know your role in a moment, and that is when you're able to finally start to serve, because you're not serving people, you're serving a mission. And in order to fulfill the mission, your role is going to change, if not by the day, but possibly by the minute or by the week. the Marines get to experience that a lot better. Infantry Marines, on ground combatant Marines get to experience that with soft guys a lot better than necessarily aviators do. But the whole point, there's a quote, of course, lead follower, get out of the way. I don't know if it's get out of the way, but find your role. Find your role. Find it. And don't be so arrogant to get in the way of that role. No one is above any job. Ever. One of the great people that I met when I was in Admiral's Aide was the commanding officer of Eisenhower, and he actually lives here with me on Daniel Island now here in South Carolina. And he became an admiral eventually, a 2-star admiral. Traps Cloyd, went to the Naval Academy. He's an avid triathlete. The man is in his mid-60s and has like 1.5% body fat. I bet he picked up more trash on board Eisenhower than the rest of that crew combined.
ShamWow.
It was his ship. We'd be walking through the hallway, me, him, and the Admiral, and he would stop the conversation 6 times to pick up a piece of paper, a gum wrapper, whatever, stop, unscuff something on the floor.
Yep.
You couldn't stop him from cleaning that ship. He was cleaning the ship 100% of the time. He couldn't help himself because he had a pride ownership, total ownership. You talk about Jocko all the time, right? Total ownership. Purely a servant leader. Just a phenomenal example, especially for me at a very young age, where I had seen the Navy through a straw, the P3 straw, for the last 3 years, and then, blew up my perspective of it. But I think it's a cycle, and you're right, especially at the state that we were in when we came to the academy, whether you came from NAPS or not, whatever. We were in that earn and follow piece, right? And you had done something to earn the opportunity to come there, right? So you had started the earning process. I've heard the different size of fish and the different size of pond analogies on many of these podcasts. A lot of big fish and small ponds. I was like a goldfish in the ocean in my high school, I was surrounded by rock stars in their own sports in different ways. I mean, I think I graduated at the bottom of the top third, kind of like you in your TBS class, and probably about the same size. I mean, it was like 150 dudes, in my graduating class, and I was ranked like 49th or whatever the hell it was. I mean, I wasn't setting off alarm bells on anything. I was just somewhere average Joe guy that couldn't start on the football team or any other team for that matter. And, but I knew at a long snap, I think I can help us on this. So I was just a guy that figured out a niche that allowed me to be a part of a team, that allowed me to contribute to a team that was bound and determined to do something as a sum of its parts that was better than those individually. And what that allowed me to figure out is what I'm passionate about today, which is I love building teams. I absolutely, positively, more than anything else, I love building teams and then helping them figure out how to win. Because Coach Weatherby had that guy had more one-liners than you could ever imagine.
More
God
than
bless
Paul
him.
Johnson?
Oh, well, no. His were
Different types, I guess.
different, very, very different types.
Okay.
Very different types. But one of them was, now, men, how do you spell fun? W-I-N. And we all knew. And he's right. When you're addicted to winning, when you're addicted to success, when you're addicted to that, winning feels great, but losing feels 10 times worse as winning does feel great. Losing's the worst.
Yep.
I mean, and if you're cut from that cloth and you're addicted to that and you are willing to do anything for the brother next to you to make sure that you don't feel that and he doesn't have to experience that, you can do a lot of good. You can do a lot of good things, and you're willing to sacrifice a whole hell of a lot for that. The fourth quarters that we went through were brutal. And I think you can ask Justin North about the fourth quarters that he went through as a rugby player, because I ran them all. And they were not fun for those guys either. You guys ran 2 300s for your test, right, when you came back from summer break for your conditioning piece. I made the rugby guys run 3 because they had to be able to play for 40 minutes. And then they got a 5-minute halftime, then they played another 40 minutes. So in my 30-year-old knowledge, I was like, well, 2's not enough. I slowed the times down, a few seconds, but they had to run 3. And that was those guys' price of admission, right? And I think I wrote almost 20 letters of recommendation for guys to go to the SEALs while I was coaching that rugby team.
Nice.
And, I think, was Blake Taylor your class? Was he class of 10? I think he was. Blake Taylor.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Kevin Dewey? Kevin Dewey ring a bell? See, I think Kevin Dewey was 09.
Nope.
Kevin Dewey was a 147-pound All-American rugby player. No pads. 147 pounds. One of the best 15 players in the country. He went EOD. Blake Taylor went SEALs. And he was 10. He was class of 10. He's a manimal. His favorite pastime was alligator gar fishing in Texas.
Oh, I remember. Used to
Yeah.
have a trident.
You and Blake Taylor are like brothers from another mother. You just haven't met each other yet. I'll have to figure out how to get that accomplished. But sorry. But yeah, the earning part's huge. You can't start the cycle without earning.
Yep. Most
A lot of people try. Trust funds, all sorts of other things. They get handed something, and then they fail with it. It doesn't mean that you can't marry or be born into success. You can, but you still got to earn it to keep it. You got to earn it.
Yep.
And that's the first part in that cycle. Earn, follow, lead, serve. And once you get to serve, you'll never want to do anything else.
Nice. Well, tell Emma thank you
Yes, sir. Thank you.
tonight. And
Tell
awesome
Amanda
talk.
the same.
Will do. Really good. And appreciate your time.
Thanks, Tony.
All right.
And thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Lots of fun. Take care.
Have a good one.